And welcome into another episode of Tiger Territory, part of the Foul Territory Network, a Detroit Tigers podcast. I'm Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is a man who, no matter how many times you ask him, he's always going to say the same thing. He's looking to improve this podcast every day in any way that he can. He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
Yeah, Kieran, just looking to get better in all aspects. All options are always on the table, and we just do our due diligence and we try to make a good show for you guys, try to make it the best we can be. We're always looking into upgrades. I'm about out of GM speak, but there is certainly more that we could do with that bit. Anyway, let's go into what Scott Harris said. We talked to the man himself after a pretty nice deal getting Jack Flaherty. That is official. Physical is passed. Scott, it was a little bit of a victory lap for Scott with Jack Flaherty. He was, I think, not afraid to kind of tout the fact that Jack wanting to come back to Detroit, having a good experience is kind of an organizational victory for the Tigers. And you know what, Scott? Talk your stuff because he's kind of right. This is a good look. You had a premium player. You really helped him improve. He enjoyed his time there so much. He was pretty vocal about wanting to come back. And Scott Harris himself said, like, in the back of my mind, I thought I'd love to have him back. I just didn't think it would happen. Now, I think it's important to note that that's just because the Tigers didn't like want to pay this dude or like give him a long-term deal. So for as much as they love him, as great as he is like they were among many teams who didn't want him for 4 or 5 years. For as much as they're not worried about his health, they didn't want him to, for that sort of deal. But the deal you get him on is very team friendly. I mean, player friendly in a way that comes to the Tigers with no risk. So Scott was not afraid to say like he's going to enjoy watching Flaherty throw to Trey Sweeney and maybe Tyron Lorenzo in live BPs this spring. Actually, kind of crazy to think about. And I think we've said it before, but this is probably Scott Harris's best work. A really good optical look for him. And we'll see how Jack Flaherty throws this year. I think the floor for Jack, if he's healthy, which is an if, but if he's healthy, is going to be pretty high. Like Jack Flaherty's a really good pitcher. I think it's a good move for the Tigers.
Yeah, in regards to the contract thing, it's kind of like when a player gets drafted and rounds like 4 on in really any sport. It's like we loved him the whole time. It's like, well, you didn't love him enough to not take him earlier, So regardless, to the victor go the spoils there if you're Scott Harris. And I watched that availability and he had a combination of like calm but also like assertiveness, if that's like a way to describe it, because
I asked him about Jack's fastball and Jack's health,
yes.
not because I was being critical, just because I was like, people are going to want to know the answers to these questions, and he was kind of like, a little adamant, like, we're not worried about that, we're not worried about his fastball,
and honestly kind of frank about like things that he believed would explain sort of the dip in velo and how his numbers kind of trickled a little bit toward the end of the year. It's like, like he came up just short of like kind of criticizing the Dodgers like pitching department a little bit, like just short. He didn't specifically, but you could kind of like infer. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's a he's an athletic young guy. He can fix it. Not worried about it at all. And then with the health thing, it's like I said on the record, he was healthy. Like he was pretty assured of himself in that presser, which, more power to you. I like it. I like to see Scott Harris like that. And he also like did that with cliches as well. So it was a great balance of Scott Harris.
it all. Yeah.
He covered it all because again, you add a pitcher after already adding a starting pitcher earlier in the offseason, right? And so it's like, this 5 thing, it doesn't take long to count the 5, right? So like you ask about like the Jackson Jobe thing, or I don't know if you asked it, but somebody asked it in the availability, and he basically said, we're going to do, this is the cliche part, we're going to do what's best for Jackson Jobe and the Tigers. He's going to be a Tiger for a long time. We look forward to watching him. We won't be distracted by outside noise or something like that, which the outside noise in this case is just like whether he's going to start the season with the team. I don't necessarily consider that like outside noise, but I understand, I guess, where
he's talking about like the prospect promotion incentive when like that kind of balanced with service time, and he called that outside noise. Like, I know what he was trying to say, but it's not outside noise. A large part of Scott's job is worrying about that sort of stuff. And it's going to be a hard decision with Jobe. And I think a lot of it's going to come down to just how he throws. And no one else is really talking about this, but I think the biggest X factor in Jackson Jobe making the team or not is what they want to do with Kenta Maeda. And we don't, I'm sure we'll get a indication of that early in spring training, but they haven't said a lot other than winter meetings talking about revamping his plan. But do they want him to start? Do they want him to be in the bullpen? Is there a world where they just say, screw this and pay him $10 million to go away? I still have a hard time seeing that happening, even though that's the easiest solution. But
Yeah, I
what
mean,
goes up and looks good. I mean,
yeah, I almost think it would be. It's out of my mind. He's a starting pitcher right now. Like he would have to prove it. He would have to prove it to me. Like it was so ugly. We've talked about the July 4th game before on this podcast. It started out mediocre if you were optimistic, and then it just like bottomed out, and it honestly was a huge blot on Scott Harris's like free agent. It's not been a present baseball operations all that long, but a little blot on like his thought process that you gave this guy a 2-year deal, right? With the way that it turned out. So I almost don't even put him in the conversation. I'm thinking about the Mises and the Jobes of the world. And the interesting thing about that quote, even though it's not very interesting words wise, but we have been on this podcast. You have reported like the Tigers expect Jackson to be in the rotation. And that
I think that was before they signed Jack Flaherty.
Yeah.
They thought that was a possibility.
Exactly. So that quote, in a way, could be a little bit of a walk back, like a little bit.
I think so.
We could look back on and be like, yeah, it was kind of the first indication they were gonna, probably, do the Toledo route.
I think this all adds up to something we've joked about all offseason, which is the Scott Harris press conference where he says Jackson Jobe needs to improve all 4 of his pitches to all 4 quadrants. And because if you have all these other options, if you're curious about Maeda, or if Casey Mize has a good spring, or if like, for as much as the Tigers want to win and want to win the Central, how realistic is it that Jackson Jobe is just going to shove out of the gate? And Paul Skeens did it last year, but Derek Skubal didn't do that as a rookie. I've said I could see Jobe having a Verlander-esque rookie season where he's pretty good in the aggregate, but there are kind of a lot of ups and downs if you just like look at the game logs. Could you get pretty equal production from Casey Mize, whatever, in the first month of the season? And is there more of a benefit to getting an extra year team control of Jackson Jobe? Especially when you look at this farm system, all they got on the rise. I don't love service time manipulation. It'd be cool if you could get another draft pick down the line or whatever, but I think there's some real pluses to just saying, let's keep him in Toledo for a little bit. And then you're really going to feel good about that in 2029 or whatever it is. You're going to be like, yeah, I'm glad we didn't, have him pitch April in Detroit in 2025.
Yeah, so that actually goes to a larger issue that that kind of racks my brain from time to time, is that if this farm system is so loaded, which we're going to talk more about that, this week as the season is underway. Happy spring training week to everybody. If you're so deep and you're focused on young in farm system wise, and you're focused on young talent, are we at the beginning of a high amount of turnover type regime where you just kind of believe in your ability to develop players and you're not really in the big contract business? We're going to get an answer to that in some way in the next 2 years. You guys know what I'm talking about. So like that might be something everybody needs to prepare for. This might be the way Scott Harris dreams running an organization. And so like get that maybe make sure before you purchase that jersey. That's all I'll say about that. But that's all I'll say about that. So I just feel like the seeds are there for that too, Cody. The seeds are there for a high amount of turnover.
Kieran, they absolutely are. I think there are a million signs that point to that direction. The one thing that doesn't, let's talk about the good stuff. The one thing that doesn't, the Tigers do have interest in Alex Bregman. Now, we don't know what they've offered. We don't know exactly what their price point is. But if they just were going to be an organization that had no interest in free agency, I'm not sure we would still be talking about this on this podcast. So it remains curious to me that they like Bregman enough, they recognize he fills their needs enough that they have waited this out all winter. I think I told you 2 weeks ago, like, yeah, I think we're almost done. I think maybe we've done our last pod before Bregman signs. Yeah, that didn't happen. And then in the couple days before Flaherty signed and the couple days after, I'm just telling you, man, the vibes were like high. I don't know if people in the organization were just kind of emotionally blinded or something. I mean, that's entirely possible. They were kind of vibes like, oh, the Tigers might get Bregman. And now, at least from my end, I've heard nothing for like 6 days, just nothing. Even online, whatever, you can talk yourself like maybe there's some momentum to the Cubs, but it's been quiet even in like the online Twitter rumor mill. I don't know. I don't think anyone has a great answer to what's going on or what's going to happen. Scott Boras and Alex Bregman think someone's going to give them this offer they've been waiting for. I think they're probably misguided. Now, if there's a good offer on the table, I don't know, 5 years, high AAV, and opt out, it would seem like Bregman and whatever team we're offering that could strike a great middle ground. I feel like that's probably what should happen, but maybe that's too simple. Bregman ultimately decides he wants a short-term deal, which he says he doesn't. I'm not sure the Tigers are going to be the team he goes to. A combination of the ballpark and like maybe just the prestige of. I could see him going to the Cubs. I don't know if the Red Sox have never acted very serious about him, but maybe they would on a shorter term deal. And then the Blue Jays, I don't know. Like I think if he were going to go to Toronto, he would be there. So you can talk yourself into so many circles. There's still a world in which he could become a Tiger, but I went from feeling good about it really for the first time all winter a week or so ago to now just I don't know. And it's almost led me to see the other side of this more. Now I want to be clear. Ultimately, I still think the Tigers should sign Alex Bregman. But it's a lot easier for me to play devil's advocate than it was a month ago. Is this guy worth it? Is this guy worth the stress, the waiting? Is he worth the players you have passed on? Passed on Kim. That's kind of always the guy I thought the Tigers were going to get. Well, the Rays signed him on a 2-year deal with an opt-out, not that much money. We talked about first baseman. They passed one and they signed Gleyber Torres instead. They've sacrificed a lot, it would seem, to stay in this Bregman mix. And I don't know. I was just looking at the Fangraphs Zips 3-year projections the other day, and projections aren't everything, but it kind of hits like some cold water. Because 2 years from now, in 2027, Fangraphs projects Alex Bregman to hit 241 with 17 homers, a 721 OPS, 2.1 WAR. That's 2 years from now, at age 33. Basically saying he's going to be Matt Vierling. And so you want him for 6 years? You want him for 3 years after that? It's kind of scary. Alex Bregman is a really good player. He checks every box for this team, but he's not really probably a Hall of Famer unless he dominates for his 30s, like Fangraphs does not project him to do. He's an all-star right now. Is he going to be a perennial all-star for years to come? I'm not sure. Like, he has become so overrated just because of his standing on the market. And you know what? If the Tigers were finally to say, you know what, screw this, I wouldn't blame them. I would go back and criticize and be like, maybe you should have pivoted to someone else a long time ago.
Valentine's Day is coming up, and we have the recommendation for you to check out right now. Don't wait. It's 1-800-Flowers.com. This year, we're partnering with 1-800-Flowers to make sure you're a Valentine's legend with an exclusive offer for the FT fam. It's double the roses for free. When you buy 1 dozen, they're going to double your bouquet to 2 dozen roses. It's the perfect way to wow her without breaking the bank. 1-800-Flowers always delivers. Let them dominate this holiday. It's what they do best.
Think about everyone in your fam that deserves some love on Valentine's Day. I sent a bouquet to my daughter at college, and it lit up her day. I also added an awesome vase to the order for her, so she's got it all.
All roses from 1-800-Flowers are picked at their peak, cared for every step of the way, and shipped fresh to ensure lasting beauty. Don't wait. Think ahead this year. Make it easy and get that deal right now. When you order 1 dozen, they'll double the rose bouquet for free. That's the FT deals that we're always looking out for. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/FT. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/FT.
Yeah, so a couple of things there. One is that there's the Tigers fan base is so starved for a consistent winner, so it's not as prevalent, but I'm getting texts, I'm getting messages from Tigers fans being like, look, dude, at this point, I just want to move on. I just want to move on mentally from this. Like, I'm done, like, without, and it's not like ire really at the team for not signing him. It's like kind of at Alex,
it's flipped that way. Yeah.
And like, I got Houston Astros fans in my life, and they're done with it too. It's like, you should have taken our deal, 6 months ago or whatever. And now look where you're at. And like with Boston, it's like, I don't see anyone clamoring for him in Boston, plus, the configuration that would have to happen with that franchise, which really just leaves Toronto as what I'm assuming is the team that has the best offer out there. But again, do you want to, as we talked with Austin Jackson last week, it's like, do you want to move your family to Toronto? Like, I don't know. I don't have anything against Toronto, but like, there is sort of that mental hurdle you have to get over if you want to like live in another country. It's just a thing. So like all that stuff, his approval rating is lower. There's no doubt about it. His approval rating is lower now than it was at the end of the season. I feel like that's pretty clear based on everybody that I'm talking to and the things that I read. And because the longer you're a free agent, the longer kind of people look at your, contractual projections and all that stuff, the more people do what you just did, Cody, which is like,
you can talk yourself out of it.
You talk yourself out of it. You're like, man, the Zips, I'm not really loving that. It's like, he is 31. Like, so we're going to be paying this dude potentially this much money when he's 35, 36. Is he going to be remotely, you know what I mean? It's just like, he's become a little bit of like this most recent example of what the broken free agency system really is, what I would say in baseball. Whereas like, there's no sense of urgency. There's no other sport where a player of Alex Bregman's caliber would be, with no scandal or anything like that, would be unsigned on the eve of preseason training camp, whatever. Like, it just wouldn't happen. But it happens in baseball. And Alex Bregman is the latest example of that. And
here's another thing no one's really talking about. If Tigers get Bregman, say it has an opt-out. Let's say it's after 1. I don't know if they do that. Let's say it's after 1. Maybe that's what it's going to take to get him at this rate. Do you want him if he comes here for 1 year and opts out? In a way, that'd be perfect. He helps your 2025 team. Then you don't have to worry about the aging. It's also like, I don't know, you wasted a whole year at Jace Young, didn't get him that experience. You signed this guy, got all this hype, and then he's gone. Is that worth it? I almost actually think yes. I kind of think that'd be like great, but that's a question people aren't really discussing.
So that would be perfect to me. Like, I would do that in New York minute. Just essentially have him as a mercenary for a year. I don't necessarily.
That's the other Fangraphs thing, is how much he boosts their playoff odds, like 12% or whatever, second most of any team. Tigers need this guy, and they need offense. They might not need him 5 years from now. They kind of do need him this year.
And that's another thing too. That was in your story in The Athletic, is that like, you feel optimistic after a little bit of a playoff run. As currently constructed and projected, it's not all that certain.
Something else that's in cold water. Pacoda was at 79, 80 wins. Fangraphs. Mm-hmm. I don't have it in front of me. Fangraphs 81 wins. That might not be.
I think it's a little higher, but it's like
83 or something. No one. The bottom line is no one's picking the Tigers to win 90 games based on their current roster. And you look at these projections, and there's probably everyone has their own like biases. But I'm like, I think Riley Green can outperform that, and I think Colt Keith can outperform that. And but what if the bullpen just doesn't dominate? Dan Dickerson says all the time, a great stat. Their runs allowed last year was the 3rd lowest since like 1968 or something in Tigers franchise history. What that means is that's just really tough to replicate historically. So the bullpen regresses. You have some bad luck, whatever. And these things can cancel each other out, man. So they need more, and that's where I kind of come back to. You've waited on Bregman so long. Now, if you don't get him, as much as we're going to hear how great they feel about Matt Vierling and Jace Young, and they might be right, still be nice to have a Kim or a Christian Walker, or we could throw out other names to give that extra player that extra bat. And I don't know. Scott said they're always exploring the trade market, but I'm not sure what that deal is going to be that brings you the right-handed bat that you need.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like I imagine, Jace is probably like, should I feel comfortable now? Now that spring, I mean, I know he's still on sign, but like spring training's like here, like should I feel okay about this? It could be taken away from him.
If Bregman signs, we're going to hear Nolan Arenado rumors the first day after that. I don't know if they'll be real or not, but we're going to no, it'd be hard. It's a great point. Like I've already heard players are like, Jace, Vierling, these guys are kind of like, where am I? What position am I playing? Where should I be devoting my time?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, we don't really know. That would suck.
Yeah, it would. And again, like if we're going back to like how things have played out, so like obviously Harris played the Flaherty market perfectly, and the Bregman market is still remains to be seen. But like I still am waiting for that one Jace Young quote. I'm still waiting for that one, like, you guys understand what this bat, what we see in this bat, whatever. Like it easily could happen. It hasn't happened, but the inaction to address that position leads me to believe like they must feel some level of confidence there, because otherwise, I don't use this word lightly. Otherwise, it's kind of malpractice. If you don't feel good about a Vierling Young platoon at third base and you do nothing to address it.
Yeah. I mean, what I've heard through the grapevine since January is they feel good about their offer. They feel good about their standing in the Bregman race. Kind of interesting that
What does
no
that
one
even
has ever
mean, though,
leaked
if you
this
lose
offer.
them?
And yeah, like, how do you? No, it means nothing. But they think they're going to get him. So it's like, is that they just think they know the market better than everyone else? Is that maybe Scott Harris is a genius at reading these markets, man? Maybe he's going to get Flaherty and Bregman both on team-friendly deals, and it's like going to have a parade for Scott. I mean, I'm not like
No, it could
it's like
happen.
maybe, but yeah, it is. There are just so many things that can go wrong. You wait him out and the market declines, and it's like, are you sure he's going to pick you over Boston, over Chicago, over whatever else might be out there? We already saw how the Astros re-entering this mix seemed to throw the negotiations off a little bit, even though that hasn't happened yet. All right. I got my rant out. I'm done. I have nothing more to say about Alex Bregman
until something happens. Don't blame me there. But yeah, it is. I think it's tiresome for everybody involved to just kind of be sitting here waiting, speculating about nothing. But at the same time, like, it shows what he could be with that stat you said about his playoff chances increasing. So, like, there's a reason. There's a reason we devoted so much mental energy to this equation. So, with this being spring training week, I wanted to kind of float some questions, some things I'm looking for, Cody, and this is basically like me putting it out there for us to be able to talk about it once something tangible is said or done, or you see or you observe, whatever. We could just kind of get right into it with the Jace Young thing. It was like, what if this like wrist injury that is, I guess, hopefully healed is like he's fine. Like, it's fine. It's fine.
He's
we
fine.
got Jace Young. We got Jace Young and Matt Vierling. We're fine, guys. Like, there's no need to panic. Like, how is he going to look in spring training? I know, like, not like stats or whatever how he does, but how is he going to look? How is he going to hold himself the first time being a major leaguer in spring training, especially with this cloud that I'm sure was over his head the entire offseason. So I'm curious about that. You mentioned before And we haven't really talked a lot about Gleyber Torres, signed seemingly a long time ago. but that's your big move. I mean, the Flaherty one trumps it now, but like obviously positional player, that's your move. That's your move to improve this team, to improve the lineup as you sign Gleyber Torres. Often maligned in New York, but like a good player. And you can go back and listen to our podcast after he agreed to a contract and get our full thoughts there. But this week he was kind of in the news because he was I don't want to say he was like taking receipts, but because it was kind of like saying like the past is the past, but he was like kind of noting the things that were said about him by people in and around his former organization. And it got me thinking, I was like, there's a time this guy was considered a future killer. And I don't know if he's ever really going to be that like now, but like, what if this is like, if you get the best version of Gleyber Torres, that's a better improvement than what we're talking about right now. And so like, that's something I'm like, Gleyber Torres comes from the Yankees. He's got all this experience. He's experienced pretty much everything that the game has to offer. And now he's here. What does that look like for the gritty Tigers, basically? You know what I mean? And then
Yeah. There are days I wake up and I'm like, have people we have as a baseball community underrated the Gleyber Torres signing. Like, you need a right-handed bat, and you got a guy who has been an above league average hitter pretty much for the duration of his career, who gets on base, who makes pretty good contact, and with the potential to boost the power a little bit. The chances that Gleyber Torres finishes with an offensive stat line better than Alex Bregman's next year, very
yeah,
real, very real. Maybe this guy's all you needed. If he weren't a terrible defender and a terrible base runner and all that other stuff that makes him like a flawed player. But there are days where I'm like, this might be an underrated signing. What if Gleyber comes out and hits 270, 30 bombs, 345 OBP, and is just like, he's what you needed. There are also days where I wake up and I'm like, is this not getting panned enough? That the Tigers had all offseason, they passed on all these first basemen, and the one thing they got was a player who somehow made their infield defense worse than it already was. And like, you didn't get Christian Walker. I don't think they ever really wanted Pete Alonso, but you didn't even really explore that because you jumped to get Gleyber 1 year, $15 million. So I don't know how to feel about this guy. I'm pretty interested to watch him. In a way, I almost lean more toward the former, that I'm kind of optimistic about what he's going to bring to the lineup.
Like, an argument could be made, Cody, that like he was valued by Harris and company so highly that they gave him like, $15 million, nothing to sneeze at with the way Scott Harris doles out contracts, right? They gave him $15 million, and you moved your Silver Slugger potential second baseman to move him to first base, a position that I'm guessing he's never
Probably
played.
not going to win the Silver Slugger.
He's probably not going to win the Silver Slugger. Probably not going to make an all-star team at that position. And a guy who like had to figure it out on the fly at second base last season, and then you just go ahead and you move him to first base. So you completely blew up which the follow of that is obviously Torkelson's probably not going to be in Detroit, at least to begin the season. So you completely blew up the right side of your infield for Gleyber Torres, essentially. So you can look at that one of two ways. You can look at that as maybe trying a little bit too hard and not finding a good fit for your organization and what the assets that you have. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is maybe they just really see something there that's going to make a huge difference. And it's worth the potential of Colt Keith having some growing pains at first base. And it's worth kind of turning the page on Spencer Torkelson. Like, maybe that's the case there, because the Gleyber Torres signing, while interesting at the time and off our radar, is going to prove to be very consequential one way or another.
Agree.
Because You could ruin Colt Keith. What if he just like can't figure it out at first base, or it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just all these things that fall out from that. I'm not predicting it. I'm saying these things can happen. Which again, Colt Keith, another question. How is he? We haven't heard from him since all this happened, and now this will be our first chance to kind of see what he's thinking and look at him. How is he in these drills? Like, I'm a guy who likes having like a more athletic first baseman in general. So like that part, I don't have any doubts, but it's a different.
Is he a more athletic first baseman?
For a first baseman in today's baseball?
Is he more athletic than Spencer Torkelson?
I mean, probably not, but he's more athletic than Carlos Santana at age 38, right?
Carlos Santana's a great defender.
Let's talk about.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Carlos Santana kind of dives around and makes him play. I don't know. Let's not knock on Carlos Santana here. Vlad Jr. does the splits, and we don't really have that many, just for lack of a better term, fat dudes in Major League Baseball these days because athletes take care of their body. So I don't know. I am very interested to see Colt Keith in action at first because I don't know what to expect. Can he scoop a throw? How is his footwork around the bag? How will he do? Something to really watch him. Spencer Torkelson struggled with ground balls to that backhand side. Like, is he going to have the right instincts on those plays? Because that could be a big problem, especially with a second baseman, Glaber, who's not a good defender. How's that dynamic going to work out? It's going to take some time probably to get a good read on it, but I just want to see, does he look natural over there? Like, is it like something where you can tell right away, like, oh, this is going to be a struggle for a bit? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean the clips are going to be well circulated whenever they exist with Colt Keith at first base. Also, a guy that
away, I'm gonna have to post like Colt Keith takes throws at first base. And it's gonna be the most boring video of all time, and people are just gonna love it.
The numbers, it's gonna do numbers, as they say. Another guy that we haven't really heard from this offseason, Riley Green, who is like officially an all-star. He is an all-star player.
An all-star player.
This is factual information. And he reached the threshold that I have been looking for, where he was in the gameplay montage of the MLB The Show trailer.
There we go.
So like, you know, there are levels to this, and he's reached this. Is he like, can he be a star? Can he be a star in this game? And how is he handling himself in this, you know, obviously the most success he's had as a professional? He's an all-star, and he, you know, made it to the second round of the playoffs. You know what I mean? So like the Riley Green piece, we're not talking about him. He's not getting a whole lot of like publicity on national talk shows and MLB Network and all that stuff. But like, I mean, we all know what we see. Mm-hmm. I want to see what's next for him.
If I were Riley's agent, I'd be like really trying to find a way to pump his brand a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so that, I mean, Riley's good clubhouse guy. He's been good with the media and stuff, but there's got to be some way to like be a little more forward facing, dude. And some of that's on Riley. Some of that's on the Tigers. Some of that's on his agent. He's underrated nationally, and he really shouldn't be. Maybe if he just comes out and hits 35 homers, that takes care of itself. But yeah, man, it's time for Riley to keep getting his love for sure.
By the way, open invitation, Mr. Green. You can come on Tiger territory anytime. We'd love to have you on. And I already mentioned the torque piece of this, but like the two number ones, the two number overall picks, the two guys that were once looked at as the future of the franchise, and every time, Casey Mize would kind of would go out to a bullpen, it's like, oh, Casey Mize about to throw. Like, let's see what we got here, And like, especially Torkelson steps up for batting practice. Like, oh, that's Torque. Like, number one pick. Did you hear that he broke Barry Bonds like freshman record at Arizona State? And now we're way past that. Like, we're way past that. Time has kind of flew that by the wayside. So I want to know how these guys are handling it. Now they each have had adversity in their career and they've been professionals, but like that was the light was still kind of on the horizon at that point. Now it's like, I don't really know what's going to happen. So I'm curious to just kind of see how they're about it,
Yeah. Phrasing it that way is like just jarring for me how quickly things happen, how short the lifespan of the professional lifespan of an athlete really is. What, 6 spring trainings? Each one's kind of a marker in time, but we've gone from Casey Mize, the new young guy, Casey Mize, the future of the franchise. Casey Mize is now a big leaguer to like Casey Mize hurt. Does Casey Mize even have a future? That is just
the game
almost hard to comprehend. And the same with Twerk. I think Mize is still like there's going to be a role for him. It's just a matter of what he wants it to be, what the Tigers want it to be. We just laid out a scenario in which maybe he's your 5th starter. The bullpen, I still think he could play well there if he can. He's going to need the splitter to be consistent. Pair it with the fastball. We'll talk more about this on a later episode. I've gotten really into Stuff Plus. Saris wrote a great article on its impact. I think it explains some of the stuff the Tigers are doing, why they're getting outs despite not striking guys out. I think they've identified certain pitches that generate actually consistent lower BABIP and ground balls, and so we can talk about that later. Mize doesn't grade out that well in Stuff Plus, but he graded out really well in Location Plus. He was actually locating his pitches really well. And we know there's the potential for the stuff to be better. This guy still has a future in the game. I'm just not sure what it's going to be. And then, Kieran, we can get your thoughts on Twerk. That's a toss-up, man. I think he could have a great spring. I'm just still not sure there's a place for him on the roster right now.
There's not. I don't think there's a smooth way for him to be on the roster. I don't have him. We'll do a projection this week. I'm not going to have him there. I'm not sure what to if he does anything in any spring training game. It's going to be met with like a he's going to be on the team at some point this year. He's going to have an opportunity to make his mark and maybe like truly make Scott Harris like live up to his words about whether like this Colt Keith at first base thing is just like 2025, then we'll figure it out, moving forward. Like he will have an opportunity, I believe, to do that. But it's not going to come down to like whether you're working hard, which is what Scott Harris said, like, during the Torres signing. I have no doubt Torque's a hard worker. It's going to come down to kind of showing that you have a better feel in the batter's box, and then whatever mechanical things that they're having you do to, in order to get more force and, other fancy terms that we don't have to get into here. But to me, he is below the surface of the 2025 team, and as much as I hate seeing it, there's not really any alternative to that. So, but he's not going to get traded. Scott Harris is not going to trade Spencer Torkelson because of the reasons I just laid out. There's still like a way that he becomes a viable asset, and you're not going to give up on him before you absolutely have to. So yeah, that was a lot. We basically made like 5 questions into 60, which is okay. That's what we do here. A little bit of a PSA programming announcement. Now that the season is here, quote unquote, because spring training is about to start, we will go to a 3-day format during the week. So Mondays, as usual, we'll have a podcast on Wednesday mornings, and then we'll have a podcast on Friday mornings. And of course, if the Tigers sign Alex Bregman, we'll do an emergency pod about that. And we might even just hop on for 10 minutes if they don't sign him, just kind of be like,
I think we will.
what was going on here? So want to thank everybody for listening through the offseason, through the change. Want to thank everybody for subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast and on YouTube as we continue to grow. And follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Cody Stavenhagen. I'm at Kieran_Steckley. Pod page is at Tiger Territory _. So for Cody Stavenhagen, I am Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great spring training week.